Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. And it's been a little over a week since we recorded one of these, and it's been one of the crazier weeks of the entire season from a result standpoint and, more importantly, a news standpoint. You have an important piece on this Illinois team out indefinitely with mono, and then the flu ravaging through the Illinois locker room. A 20-point home loss, the largest home loss since John Gross's final season in Champaign, and also a pretty solid win in which Illinois looked very good and a lot of inspiring performances. So we're going to be all over the map here on this episode, but a lot to get into. I am Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. And Mike, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. Just happy to be back on campus. Saw a nice win yesterday. Bad news earlier in the week, but feeling a bit better now.
Let's jump right into that news because I think that is how we should probably start this episode, because it is important, as Illinois' starting center Tomislav Ivisic ruled out indefinitely with mono. Brad Underwood hasn't been specific in terms of timeline. There's really no reason to be or ability to be, because mono is one of those where, some guys will be out 2 weeks, some guys will be out a month and a half. You have to build back up after not being able to do anything physical for a while. It's just a tough situation. We talked about on our instant reaction to the Michigan State game how Brad had mentioned that Big T had strep throat, is what he thought, in that Michigan State game, and he played through that, actually played pretty well in that game. Turns out, no, it was actually mono, and he has missed the last two games. He was ruled out right before that Maryland game, and then Brad Underwood announced on Saturday that it's mono that he's dealing with. My rough guess would be that it's still going to be a week or two at minimum before you see Tomislav Ivisic back on the floor again. I'd be surprised if Illinois gets him back anytime all that soon. So Illinois is going to have to play without one of their most important players. I think, for me personally, obviously Kasparis is the guy, but in terms of number two guy that you wouldn't want to lose for an extended period of time, I think he'd probably be the top candidate for that. So we've seen 2 games without him now, and it's been a mixed bag, much different matchups for starters. But now Illinois maybe going to have to be without their starting center for a little while. How do you look at that, and how confident are you in Illinois being able to stay afloat without him?
I think the upcoming schedule is a huge factor because, like at minimum, he's going to be out weeks. I know Brad Underwood said he's feeling a bit better. It's not contagious. He was back on the bench for the past 2 games, but still, even if he's healthy, you got to get back in shape. You got to get acclimated to playing a 40-minute basketball game once again against Big Ten teams. So it's a pretty huge blow. But with some of these upcoming games coming up, Nebraska, Ohio State, I think Minnesota's in there somewhere, some of the weaker teams in the Big Ten, bottom half of the Big Ten teams. So Illinois has a chance to get some nice wins, not resume wins, but wins that you need to stay as a high seed in March, to stay afloat in the Big Ten tournament, top half of that. So I think it's going to be really tough. It is nice having Merez Johnson, a 4-star, maybe a 5-star recruit, just as your backup center. He's going to give you 100% effort every single second he's out there. He got inserted into the starting lineup. Brutal matchup against Julian Reese and Derek Queen. Nobody's winning that matchup by themselves. When you've got Hummerkaus and Jake Davis being the other 2 guys guarding them, it's just a brutal spot to be in. But then he looked a lot better against Northwestern, kind of dominated Nick Martinelli and just controlled the entire paint that game. So I think overall, Illinois has the pieces to survive this with KJ, with a great duo of guards and some great pieces in Hummerkaus, Trey White, these other guys off the bench. But it is so tough because Tomislav Ivisic, as we talked about in our Michigan State postgame episode, we saw him just in the second half when KJ was out. He's running the offense. He's top of the key, just throwing lobs, shooting threes by himself. He was so crucial to this offense. And not even just that, Brad Underwood has said he's our best defensive player. He grades out as one of the best players every single game. He's the leader of the defense. He has the highest IQ on the team, without a doubt. So it's a brutal loss, but I think Illinois, it's a great program and has great pieces on the roster this year, and the upcoming schedule is pretty light. So I think they will survive and end up doing pretty well in the next couple weeks if he's out.
I think the Maryland game was just a little bit alarming in terms of the way it happened, but also when you take a step back and realize that that is literally the worst possible matchup to get the news that your starting center is going to be out for. And, I think it was obviously we didn't really know that that was the case, just thought he was sick with, this neurovirus or whatever the heck's going around, and he'd be back and be full go after that Michigan State game. Didn't really realize until a couple hours before tip that he was going to be out. And then it hits you like, oh, there's two of the best big men in the Big Ten, probably the best front court duo, maybe save for Michigan in the conference, is coming to town. And you could tell 4 minutes into that game, Maryland was going to get whatever they wanted in the paint. Merez, for as good as he is, it was a tough spot to throw him into in his first career start, and he struggled in that game, bounced back great on Sunday. That's not the problem at all, is who you're replacing Tomislav with in the starting lineup. Every Merez minute that I can get, I am thrilled with, and I think, he's a guy that can just make such an impact on a game. Yes, you're going to look a lot different, especially offensively when he's out there, because he isn't the floor spacer. He isn't the guy that can stretch it out, and obviously he isn't the passer that Tomislav is, but I think the starting lineup will be more than fine inserting Merez in there. It's just that you have nobody else behind him. So if you are playing two bigs, all of a sudden, you were probably going to get 25 minutes of Tomislav and Merez together trying to battle with Reese and Queen. You weren't able to do that. In fact, Merez gets in foul trouble. Jake Davis is guarding Derek Queen. Good luck trying to win that basketball game. Maryland had 62 points in the paint. Just a nightmare matchup. At the same time, I think that was a disappointing performance on Thursday, and we can talk about that a little bit later for other reasons. But I think that the two biggest keys while Tomislav is out is Merez needs to keep himself on the floor. Saw him able to play 35 minutes against Northwestern, which was his career high, and boy, was he good in that game. Just a constant impact, his energy, his effort on the glass, and he's starting to score the ball better. I think he's taken big strides around the basket just in terms of his touch and adding a little bit of a true low post game, more so than just a guy who's going to rim run and dunk and throw lobs down. I've been impressed with that, but 35 minutes and every one of them counted in that Northwestern game. But that's been the one struggle for him, is keeping himself on the floor, and we saw him get 2 fouls in the first half against Maryland. So he's got to keep himself on the court, realize how important he is, and that if he sits, that small lineup, can maybe cause some offensive issues for teams, but boy, you got anybody with a pulse in the front court, and you're going to get eaten alive when you got Ben Rickhouse as your tallest player. Kerry Booth, didn't really look the part on Thursday. No offense to Kerry, but I think there's a reason he probably isn't in the rotation right now, and you saw it on Thursday. So Merez just has to keep himself on the floor. If he does, I think he's more than capable enough to play really strong minutes for Illinois at the 5 and fill in that spot. But then really offensively is where you're going to miss Tommy a lot, because he was coming on as a secondary playmaker, a guy you could run a lot of action through. So your backcourt now has more of the playmaking burden on him. And KJ's had that all season long, but you saw it against Maryland. They combined for 12 turnovers, and a lot of them were really bad, just rushed, out of control, really costly turnovers, and that just can't happen with your backcourt, because those two guys are pretty much going to be initiating everything for you here. You don't have that big guy that you can throw that changeup in there with offensively as a playmaker from the top of the key. So your guards are really going to need to take care of the basketball, and I want to see a lot better from Kylan Boswell in the playmaking department and in the ball handling department than we've seen. I think he took a step forward against Northwestern there, but your guards are going to have a lot more on their shoulders too in order to make up for the Tomislav loss, because he's important defensively, and his size just against other big men is huge, but man, offensively is where you're really going to be hurting.
Yeah, no question. And just everybody in general has to step up. The thing with the KJ and Boswell turnovers against Maryland, I don't want to throw that game out, but so much of that game I think was just circumstantial. Things just kind of collapsed all at once. I don't think you're going to see another performance quite like that. Maybe Illinois drops a game with Tomislav out. But
Brad said that he had 7 guys in practice because the flu was going through the locker room too. So there was some other stuff going on.
It was your first game without Tommy. Trey and Will were pretty much dead. And so, they combined for 12 turnovers. You didn't even have Merez for half the game. You're playing through Hummerkaus and Dre and these other guys, Jake Davis. So I think part of that was just the whole team being flustered. Half the team's out at that point, and KJ and Kylan just trying to do too much. But that performance was terrible as a whole. But Northwestern was just a whole different atmosphere, a whole different energy from the opening tip. There were like three jump balls in the first 30 seconds of the game. Marez diving on the floor, everybody getting after it. But yeah, I think I want to hit on your point about Marez's foul trouble. Like he's gotten in foul trouble a couple times, notably in the Maryland game. But the thing that gives me some hope is I feel like a lot of his fouls are kind of ticky-tacky. Like it's just like small mental mistakes. You look at some other past Illinois freshman bigs. Amani Hansberry would come in and just murder people last year. Kofi Coburn would kill people when he came in. The guy's just being way too physical. Marez is like a bump here, a bump there, accidentally trip somebody. Like, yeah, they're fouls, you got to call them. But overall, like, I have some hope that he's going to clean that up. And like you said, he's going to realize how crucial he is as really the only five man, the only real threat in the low post for this team with Tomislav out. So, as I said earlier, like I do have some hope in this team. A lot of people overreacted to that Maryland loss, writing the season off, just quitting on the team pretty much as fans. I'm not in that category at all. I think there's going to be some ups and downs, especially with Ivisic out. We know how crucial he is to this team. But overall, I think they're going to be good. Like KJ and Boswell. KJ's a top 5 pick. Boswell's a veteran guard. They're going to get it figured out. The Northwestern game was a step in the right direction. So I'm still pretty confident in this team overall.
And just the Northwestern game in general was exactly what you needed to see because it felt like such a underrated, important game. And I mean, I think everybody realized that it was a crucial game for Illinois to win coming off what happened against Maryland. But just, part of the Maryland game too, and I totally agree with you. I think, you have to realize that it was probably a really tough week and that it wasn't just a situation where, it was an off night for Illinois. I think there was a lot of things happening there that contributed to a lot of guys just not looking themselves and the energy being a little flat. But I do think to just say that the Maryland game was because Tomislav was out and it was a bad matchup is a little oversimplifying things because I do think Illinois had chances early in that game and just played terribly and it was flat and there wasn't a lot of energy and Illinois got punked in the second half, had no answers, bad turnovers. So some of that, was alarming in terms of how it happened, but the real thing that was going to tell me how to feel about this team in the long run was what happened on Sunday, because it could have gone one of two ways. One, you lose again, you're flat again, Nick Martinelli kills you and with your lack of front court depth, and Northwestern sweeps the season series. You go to 500 in conference play. You have 7 losses. You've lost 3 straight home games for the first time since John Gross was the head coach. It's like, then we're at a point where, okay, how much longer can we really feel like this team is a national contender? Because at some point your record says who you are. And, ultimately you would have realized that Illinois wasn't at full strength and, you still have the opportunity when you get back healthy to get things right. But man, you would have put yourself in a tough spot and you would have been sliding down the seed list. But just the response that Illinois had gave me a lot of confidence that, hey, this is still the team I think they can be. That Maryland game was just a small blip in the radar. You can't explain that away with some of the other circumstances that were happening. And ultimately, Illinois realized how important that game was to come back, respond on their home floor, make sure you don't let this slide get to a point where it can really derail you. Because all of a sudden, if you've lost 4 or 5 games and you know that you're going to be missing a guy, nobody's confident. You go into a stretch where you think it should be easy, but everybody's in their own head, and you forget what winning actually looks like. And Illinois, I thought, just like you said, from the opening jump, to have 2 guys dive on the floor for loose balls, jump balls in the first minute of the game, just felt like there was a totally different energy. Brad Underwood talked about how he challenged the team and probably had one of his patented spirited Brad Underwood practices, and it was the response that Illinois needed to just kind of right the ship and feel like, hey, the sky's not falling here. We're just fine. And, even if we're without Tomislav for a little bit here, we can get this thing right and not fall too far off just because of a little rough patch. So I thought it was a really important win. It wasn't a must win of any kind for any other reason than just to feel mentally stable again amidst a little bit of a rough patch.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't even know if this is a term, but it felt like a program win, like a team win, I guess. Pretty even scoring across the board, and then just like the effort was what stuck out to me. The jump balls within 3 jump balls within 30 seconds, they probably got 90% of the loose balls, the 50-50 balls. They almost doubled up Northwestern in the rebound category. They almost had more offensive rebounds than Northwestern had rebounds. Just physical defensively, like the 15-0 run was awesome to start in the early first half. And they just never really let up until there was like 5 minutes left, and Northwestern pretty much quit by sending their bench warmers in, but at the same time went on like a 12-2 run and got back in the game almost. But yeah, it was just up and down the lineup. Not everybody even played great, but I think the effort was just what won them the game. Like it didn't even end up being a good shooting night for the team once again, but still it probably could have been a 15 or 20 point win. Just defensively, you got to highlight Merez shutting down Nick Martinelli in the first half at least, which the first half was pretty much what won them the game. Merez on a 6'7" wing, and he just completely shuts him down in the first half. Martinelli could do nothing except pull a couple threes, which he did make, but like in the paint, in the mid-range game where he thrives, Merez completely locked him down. Brooks Barnhizer, I think he was dealing with something, but he just wasn't himself. Pretty much did nothing that game. They got contributions from Leach and some other guys, but even like Matthew Nicholson barely played that game. Chris Collins said he just didn't like his effort, and that's part of that is just because Illinois out hustled, out toughed, out rebounded, just dominated Northwestern and their bigs from the opening tip to the finish of the game. So just a program win, like exactly the type of win you needed. Jake Davis hitting a couple threes, Hummerkaus hitting threes, guys just up and down the lineup, like I said, contributing in every possible way. Like the amount of passes and like balls that were going out of bounds and guys are jumping and throwing them back and saving them. Like that's just exactly the type of stuff you needed to see after a really poor effort and poor performance against Maryland a couple days prior. So yeah, it's just like, as you said, kind of inspire some hope in the team and in the fan base and nationally. Like, yeah, this team lost a couple guys. They're not healthy right now. They've lost a couple at home, a couple games at home, but they're still Illinois. Like they're still here. They're going to be competing every single night for the most part, hopefully. But yeah, that's kind of what Brad Underwood's all about, as he said in his post game, like challenging the guys in practice, and it paid off with a big win against Northwestern.
Yeah, and it wasn't even really like Illinois played their A game, or like they
didn't,
just
yeah.
went off like they did at Indiana or at Oregon. Offensively, it was okay. I mean, and guys hit some shots early. Humrikaus had a nice little heater in the first half to really pull Illinois away. And like you said, Jake Davis was making shots, but he didn't get some spectacular KJ game. He had 11 points. Now he had some really nice passes to Merez, and he was a maestro in ball screens as he usually is. And was pushing in transition a little bit, but he didn't score it all that well. And, even you look at the 3-point shooting and you go 9 for 32, shoot 28%. And, there wasn't a lot of guys who played great games. I thought Boswell was pretty good, but, he only makes 4 shots. A lot of his points come from the free throw line. So it wasn't like Illinois just had some spectacular offensive breakout, like, oh yeah, shots went in tonight. But it was, like you mentioned, it was kind of just, they played who they are. They played who a Brad Underwood team is. And 21 offensive rebounds. Defensively, I thought the intensity was really high. I really liked the adjustment, like you mentioned there, with cross-matching the front court, realizing that Matthew Nicholson just isn't an offensive threat, so we can get away with Ben Humrikaus on him. Let's put our best, most physical guy on Nick Martinelli and try to create a brick wall for him to not be able to get to his, back down action and his little 8-foot flip shot that I still can't believe averages him 20 points in a high major conference. Just insane. But Merez was really good. I thought that was a good adjustment from Brad Underwood. For all the people that say he can't adjust anything, I thought that was a very effective adjustment from the first time. And Illinois just got back to who clearly Brad Underwood wants them to be, and just, lean back on the core principles of who they've always been. And yeah, defensively was great. Should have been a 20-point win. They just fell asleep the last 3 minutes. Kylan Boswell hit a free throw to go up 19 with 2:50 to go, and Northwestern then cut it to 7 or 8 under a minute left. Illinois just fell asleep. I think they should have won this game by 20. I brushed off the last part, like, yeah, just foot off gas. Whatever. I'm not going to worry too much about that. But I just thought it was a feel-good victory. It was a great response, and it's one of those wins that can just kind of steady everything, keep everybody confident. To see another win happen now before you head back on the road here for a game at Nebraska. I just think, to the manner in which it happened and just all the things that you're used to seeing from this Illinois team on the glass, effort-wise, defensively, even when it wasn't your A game offensively, it was such a comfortable victory against a solid Northwestern team and some revenge too. That's another added piece of it. Obviously, that was a tough loss in Evanston, and Illinois was able to use that motivation and handled Northwestern here. So, yeah, I just thought great performance, and you needed that. You really, really needed that because a loss there could have been really damaging for you.
Yeah, 5-5 would have been brutal in conference play, but I don't know, like we've seen a lot of dominant performances from this team, a lot of pretty bad performances. It's just going to be a matter of which version of this team shows up in March. That's going to dictate how we view the season in the end. And a big part of that's going to be Tomislav Ivisic health. Is he back or not? Is he healthy and is he playing well? Assuming he does get back. But back to like I wanted to mention like Tomislav Ivisic was pretty huge in the previous Northwestern game. So for the Brad Underwood no adjustments crowd, like Illinois they played a whole different game the first time and then the second time a couple days ago. This time without Ivisic, like you got to have some faith in Underwood and these guys to perform the way that they should be performing, even though they really didn't play that well. It was just a matter of effort and hustle and intensity in beating a pretty solid Northwestern team. Like they were up 20 most of the game. That's a team that of course we've beat them at home pretty nicely a couple times in the last few years and lost on the road. But like it's a good program. It's a good team with a very veteran-led roster. And to be a younger team and without one of your best players and some guys are probably still sick, to go out and kind of comfortably handle them by 20 to 25 for 35 minutes of the game, like that's pretty impressive. I'd put that. I know it ended up as a 9-point win, but that was one of the more impressive wins I thought of the entire year. I would put that in category with like Indiana and Oregon, maybe not as high, but like pretty similar. So yeah, I just think crucial win for the Big Ten picture, and just the overall season picture. Like now I think we know we can compete and still survive without Tomislav Ivisic, even though he's such an important piece to this team. And like I kept saying, as we kept saying, Illinois did not shoot it super well. Like they shot it well in the first half, completely fell off in the second half, but maintained that 20-point lead for most of the second half. Like they've shown that they can win in some different ways this year, whether it's going and making 15 threes against Arkansas or kind of winning a tougher game against Northwestern or against Wisconsin and some other teams that they've done earlier in the year. Like this is a team that's young, not super experienced, obviously, but they've shown that they can close out games. They've shown that they can come from behind in some games and just compete in different ways. And I think that's pretty encouraging for the future of this team in March, at least.
And I'll tell you what, I think they're going to need to figure out how to win in certain different ways, because let's do this conversation again because it feels like it's a recurring one here. Illinois 3-point shooting numbers in conference play. Let me go through this real quick. Since the Oregon game, I had it, now I lost it. Since the Oregon game, these are Illinois' percentages from three. That Oregon game where they went 16 of 29. 19%, 32%, 22%, 34%, 21%, 21%, 28%. Currently on the season now, they are 31.9% from three as a team. That's 261st in Division I, despite being 23rd in three-point attempt rate. You look at the conference-only statistics for Illinois' rotational players. Kasparas Yakichonis shooting 39% from three, Jake Davis 35, Benham Rickhouse 34, Tomislav Ivisic 30, Kylan Boswell 28, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn 27, Trey White 17, Will Riley 14. So I think we've reached a point now, and this is like the one long-term conversation that I want to have. As much as I still feel like this team is in a good spot, and we've talked about this plenty. The 3-point shooting, I think, is something that I'm ready to sit here and say we got one more game in January here, January 30th on Thursday against Nebraska, and we're entering February. This is not a good 3-point shooting team. It was built in November to be a elite three-point shooting team. That's what the expectation was, at least a very good three-point shooting team. The offense is designed around being a very good three-point shooting team, shooting 37% from three. Certainly not under 32%. Illinois, one time in their first 10 conference games, has been above 35% from three as a team. Now, with the volume that Illinois takes, you're not expected to shoot at 45% every night, right? If you're taking 35 threes in a game and you get to double digits and you shoot 33%, well, the volume will make up for maybe not ultimately getting to a certain efficient percentage, but still, like, being in the low 20s so often, like, I just don't think this team can shoot it that great. And I think that's something that you have to start accepting with this team. Now, they've still proven that they have other ways to beat you. It's not a team, there's been some teams out there. There's been some BYU teams in the past, some, whatever the case may be, some Iowa teams even under Fran that, like, live and die by the three. If the three's not going, good luck. They're probably losing by 27 because you can't guard. You just don't have much diversification on your offense or playmakers. Illinois has that. They've got a guy who's lethal in ball screens in KJ. They got guys who can get to the free throw line, create for themselves. Obviously, when Tomislav is in there, you can run some different stuff. And they're a top 10 defense. So there's still plenty of ways that this team can beat you. But how much does the three-point shooting, or better said, lack of three-point shooting for this team, which I think is just the reality of what this team is now, how much does that make you a little bit hesitant come March or just come this team's long-term future that it could hinder their ceiling?
I think it definitely does hinder the ceiling just because it's what the whole team's based on. But at the same time, they've shown an ability to get to the free throw line and they offensive rebound. They grab offensive boards like no other team in the country pretty much. And that's partly because they shoot 45 threes a game and it's long rebounds and all that stuff, and they have good rebounders. But yeah, it's like you design the roster with Ben Hummerkaus coming over, shooting 40%, Jake Davis shooting 40%. KJ is a good shooter, Big T is a good shooter, but like Boswell, Trey White, who am I missing? They've been pretty terrible from three. And that's three of your top seven rotation pieces. That's three of your shorter guys, your guards and wings. Like, it's got to be better. And like, if Colin Boswell, we've got to a point where it's 20 games into the year, we're halfway through the Big Ten slate. Like, at some point, the numbers aren't lying. And like, yeah, maybe Boswell's having a down year, but like, you just got to call it what it is. It's a down year. Like,
yeah, I think I'm moved on to next year in terms of Kylan rebuilding his 3-point percentage. I'm probably not holding out as much hope that he's going to do it in February or March.
Yeah, I'm with you. But the thing that gives me some confidence still is like, I don't think there's been too many games where the 3-point shooting has lost them the game. You can point to like Alabama, they were terrible, I think. Tennessee was just a terrible shooting night overall, but like at the same time, they've won a handful of games where they're shooting 5 for 24, and that's like 21%. I feel like I've seen the 5 for 24 number like 6 times in the past 10 games, and they're still 6-4 in Big Ten play. So, as you said, you have KJ who like KJ can get to the hoop, he can create things even if the shots aren't falling. Other guys like Boswell can get to the hoop. Dre's got to the hoop super well. But yeah, it does limit the ceiling. It's not the level of like the BYU team last year that Illinois almost ran into in March, who ended up shooting terribly against Duquesne in the first round, which cost them their season. But Illinois has the athletes and the rebounding, I think. I think it's going to be interesting with we've talked about this, but with Tomislav out and now Morez is kind of the anchor in the low post. Do they transition to shooting less threes? I mean, we'll see. We only have a 2-game sample size and they've still shot a bunch of them. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't think Illinois is really like a first round upset target, losing to a 12 seed because they shot 3 for 27 from three. It's possible, but I think Illinois has the talent and the height and everything to withstand an upset like that. But if you go to a second round game and let's say Illinois is a 5 or 6 seed, you're playing a 3 or 4 seed, a team from the SEC who's super physical, and Illinois puts up a dud and goes 5 for 24 from three again, like they've done 10 times. Like, you're probably not going to win that game, no matter how good KJ and how good Boswell play. So I don't think Illinois is going to really switch up a game plan. Brett Underwood said, like, Illinois, we're still, yeah, okay, he's just not because they're such a good offensive rebounding team. So at this point, I think we just have to live with it. And as I said, like it's just a matter of which version of this team shows up in March. That's going to kind of dictate how we view the season.
Yeah, it's the one thing that's just kind of giving me a little pause about this team's ultimate ceiling because even just talk about like the path to a Final Four. Well, you got to win 4 games in a row in the tournament. I think you could say that one of those 4, Illinois can be on fire from 3 and probably unbeatable. They'll win the game that night. You know, if this team makes 13 threes and shoots 40%, they'll win. I don't know who beats them if they do that. Now, that's not happening very often. I do think Illinois has proven that, like you said, there's just so many other things that they can do, and the fact that they are such an elite offensive rebounding team makes it okay to take as many threes as they do without necessarily making a ton of them, because you are going to get a lot of those back and create easy offense just off the offensive glass. And obviously having a point guard like KJ who you can turn to and say, look, you know, it's not all we create offensively. So if it's a tie game with 30 seconds left and we need a bucket, we're not relying on a 3 to fall when we're 5 of 28 on the night. You know, we can find offense in other ways. We have a point guard who can go create a shot in the paint, or find another guy in a ball screen, whatever the case may be. So I think that part is all good, but I just do at some point, like the math game, you're not going to win it, because if Illinois takes as many threes as they do and they continue to shoot it at the 261st highest rate in the country, ultimately you're just not going to be able to build a long winning streak, because there's just going to be nights you're not going to be able to overcome that every single time out. If you shoot 25% 4 straight nights, Illinois is good enough to win 2 of those 4, but you probably aren't winning the other 2 because it's just so hard to overcome the math part of that, even as good as they are defensively. So it's a little bit of a concern for me in terms of just limiting how hot this team can get at one time, unless they all of a sudden catch fire and some of these guys really start to knock down shots and they completely transform. I just don't think that's going to happen at this point. The sample size is big enough. That's the one thing that's holding me back from being fully still bought in on this team, because we have reached a point now where I think you just have to accept it's not a very good 3-point shooting team, and it was built to be a great one. And you know, the picture that you envision back in November of what this team would look like come March is a team that is scorching from 3, and a team that's putting up 35 threes a game and they're making 12, 13 of them every time out. And that's just not the reality at this point, but we'll see. I still do think there are some shooters who can be better. At some point you have to probably stop saying that, but I think there are, and, you know, I think Illinois can still improve a little bit marginally there, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how long of a streak they can go on, or how many good teams in a row you can beat without shooting it at a high level. That's what I don't think I feel great about happening in a tournament setting right now. Jake Davis's minutes have been pretty good. I think that's something worth mentioning real quick. I actually think he's been pretty dang solid for Illinois. There's a guy that's making some shots for you, up to 35% now from 3 in conference play after going 3 of 6 against Maryland, and he's giving you more than your projected first-round pick is giving you. He's been better than Will Riley for a big stretch here, and he's earning minutes, and obviously he's been forced into action with Tomislav out, but I just like what the mentality he brings, and he's just one of those guys that's kind of scrappy, and he's going to play hard. You know what you're going to get. You don't have to worry about, you know, him being a guy that's going to hurt you, because he's just pretty steady. Hand up, back in November, I would have told you shouldn't be in the rotation, but he's been pretty good.
Yeah, I think we did our roster breakdown episode, and I think we were laughing when we said Jake Davis's name. But I think it's been pretty telling. Jake Davis has been the first or second guy off the bench each of the last 6 or 7 games, whereas Will Riley's kind of been third or fourth off the bench. Like he hasn't been really solid. I think he's been great. Like Jake Davis, Brad Underwood called him like the stereotypical or ideal role player, whatever he said. That's completely true. Like his shooting numbers still haven't been where we expected based off his last year at Mercer. Well, like he goes and he flies in for rebounds. He's been boxing out guys like crazy. He's undersized defensively in some cases, and he's doing crazy box outs, and then running in transition, getting layups in transition. Just like he's kind of everywhere, and that's not at all what I don't think anybody expected, apart from maybe Brad Underwood. But really since that Oregon game, I think Jake Davis and Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn have just been phenomenal. Like they they really didn't do much in the first month or so of the season. I know I kind of called Dre out saying like at some point you can't be a 14% three-point shooter, like a career three-point shooter. He's been a lot better. He's gotten to the hoop super well. He's got a little mid-range game too, and I think he's just super aggressive and he's just locked in defensively. And that's kind of the same with Jake Davis. Like he doesn't flash a ton. He doesn't really pop off the screen, but he's just there and he's giving us 10 to 15 minutes a night. And that's exactly what the team needs because with Ty Rodgers out, with Will Riley battling stuff, Trey White was sick one game, Tomislav's out now, like the rotation is kind of thin or shortened up. It's kind of thinned. And Jake Davis has been a guy that's earned his minutes and his minutes have been going up. I think people have become more confident in him. He's getting more looks from three. And I think he's just been kind of the unsung hero of the past couple games, even though Illinois hasn't won a ton of them.
Yeah, this bench is really stepping up, and it's been a month long now that this bench is giving you, starting with that Oregon game when Dre and Jake carried the first half, and it was just kind of the coming out party of the bench unit. And really since then, obviously when you're healthy, Merez is part of that bench unit, and that's huge because he's a guy that's just so consistent in what he brings. But I think the stretch that Dre's been on, I know it wasn't his best game against Northwestern. I thought he still guarded well, gave you good energy. He was a guy that was on the floor a couple times. So you just know that you're going to get that intensity from Dre. That's what I really like about when Dre goes to the scores table to check in. Like you just know exactly the mindset that he's going to have. If you are flat, he's a guy that's going to bring the energy up of everybody on the floor. He's in a role where he doesn't have to do a lot of thinking. He can just play. You know, he can just play so free and aggressive, pick his spots to attack and run the floor. He's so fast in the open floor that when Illinois does get opportunities to run, he's a guy that can really take advantage of that. I just think he's been fantastic here of late, and he started to shoot it better too, which he's always been a talented shooter. It's just the results haven't happened, and I think he started to knock some open shots down here recently. And yeah, Jake has really impressed me. I was totally wrong on him. I thought he probably should not play in Big Ten games and high major games based on what I saw in early November, but he's just been steady. When he checks in, you know what you're getting. You don't have to worry about him. You know he's going to battle. Is he going to be the most athletic, quick guy? No, but he's going to knock down an open shot. He's going to battle on the glass. He's not going to get destroyed on the defensive end. He's going to be scrappy on that end. He's going to be able to hold his own physically. He is kind of underrated in terms of his strength and his body too. I mean, he's 6'6" and he's got some strength to him. So I think he's been super impressive. Is it ever going to happen with Will? Have we fully lost hope here? Coming off that Michigan State game the last time we recorded, felt like maybe could have been a turning point, and since then it's been two more duds. To his defense, he was one of those guys battling the flu. I think he looked pretty sick on Thursday, didn't really do much, but 2 of 9 against Northwestern. Is it ever going to happen with him, or is it probably a lost cause here?
I think I'll give him one more Michigan State like game where he just breaks out and gives you 12 in 10 minutes or something like that.
I'm sure that'll happen again. Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, man, I think, as I said, it's kind of telling that he's the ninth person to check in the game. Uh, like the thing was in the first month against Eastern Illinois, I think he was pretty good against Arkansas. He was taking tough shots and making them. Now the past month and a half, he's taking open shots and just breaking them. Like, and that's I was gonna mention that with the 3-point shooting talk. Like Kylan Boswell and Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn and Trey White, like they're taking open threes and just not making them. So I think at a certain point, you just got to call it what it is and say they're not going to shoot well this year. That's kind of been the same thing with Will Riley. Like he does have the tough takes to the basket, maybe a tough mid-range shot in a game. But like a lot of his 3-point attempts recently, in my opinion, have been open looks. He's kind of just chilling in the corner. He gets the open pass and it's not going in, and he doesn't look super confident. The shot doesn't look too pretty right now. And so I just don't think I really don't know what happened because he looked electric in the first month of the season. A lot of it was by games. I guess you got to call it just the competition level ramping up. Other teams are out physicaling him, I guess, but like you would think based on where he was projected in the mock drafts, where he was ranked at coming out of high school, like he had to flip a switch eventually after maybe having a couple poor games. But I think we've reached a point where I'm calling it quits. It's going to be really interesting to see how this roster changes going into next year. And I think a big part of that is Will Riley. Like, is he still an NBA guy? Is he hitting the portal? Is he coming back for year two? We'll see. I don't know.
That's kind of where my mind has already turned there. And look, he could make us look like complete morons here and
He
just
probably will,
turn it
yeah.
around and score 20 in a couple March games for Illinois. It's still within his talent ability. But yeah, there's just a point where he just looks kind of broken. And for as talented as he is, and as much as I still think he deserves to be a part of the rotation, the one thing I'll give him a lot of credit for is even with as terrible as he's been shooting the ball, he's rebounding, and he's giving you consistent offensive rebounding. You can count on him for 2 to 3 offensive rebounds a game. I think he fights hard on the defensive end and gives you good energy on that end of the floor. It's easy for a guy, especially, of his caliber coming in and of his shot-making offensive ability, to where if his offensive game's broken, I mean, he's just a statue out there giving you nothing. I don't think that's been the case with him. I think he's still giving you solid minutes in other ways. But 4 of 29 from 3 in conference play. I mean, Jake Davis made 1 less 3 than he's made in all of conference play on Sunday. I mean, the shot is just broken. I do think, part of it was the competition early that I'm sure he was able to get going, but he's gotten open shots and they just will not go in for him. And I think he's just in his head. I really was hopeful coming off that Michigan State game that, man, could this be the turning point? Just get that confidence, break out of that slump, and all of a sudden get going again. Didn't happen. I think, you could have seen maybe signs of that even within the Michigan State game, and the fact that he had such a great stretch in the first half and then scored 3 points the rest of the game. So it's just, I just don't think he is a good enough scorer at this level right now. And I think he has a ways to go. I'd be surprised, barring a big turnaround here. Now that's, mutually beneficial to both parties. If he turns things around here the last month and a half, has some big performances, figures it out, that's going to help Illinois a lot. It'd probably get him to the NBA for next year. But assuming he stays on this path, I have started to already let my mind wander to what a year 2 of him could look like. And, you'd hope, I still would hope that would be at Illinois. I still, for me, if that were to happen, I think he projects as a guy who could be one of those big-time year 1 to year 2 jump guys with another offseason of physical development and just going through some of this with as talented of a shot maker as he is. I think it could, flip like that in a second year for a guy like him. But I just don't know how much I feel like he's going to impact this team for the rest of the year. He is truly the 9th guy in the rotation when Illinois is healthy right now. Jake Davis has deservedly passed him up in terms of trust level and impact, and that's just a problem, if you're Will Riley. And I think there's just something kind of broken with him right now, and you hate to see it, but I just don't know if it's even worth continuing to have the conversation unless we actually see it happen. Though, will it happen? Will it happen? Will it happen? It's been 2 months and it hasn't. I don't know if it's going to at this point.
But I feel like it just did happen against Michigan State. It was one of those runs where he goes 16 points in 6 minutes.
In terms of an extended,
No,
he's
I know
back
what you're
type
saying.
of thing, yeah, that's going to happen again. I'll tell you that one thing, he'll have 12 points in 6 minutes again this year, but it might only happen one more time. I don't know.
Hopefully, Sweet 16 game where Illinois is 5 for 24 and he goes off. But yeah, the kind of the 9th man in the rotation, but he's still getting opportunities every single game. Puts up 9 shots. He's averaging 20 minutes over the past 6 games. So I think that gives me some hope. If he doesn't turn it around, it's Underwood still rode with you. Yeah, you're coming off the bench, but you're still getting 20 minutes a game. You're getting your shots up. I don't know why you'd enter the transfer portal. Obviously, I'm not in the locker room. This is just a hypothetical conversation. But yeah, I'm not super confident in him, although it's not to a point where he's putting a shot up and I'm just pissed off and I think it's not going in. I still think 70% of them are going in, but yeah, he's been shooting 14%, so that's obviously not the case. But yeah, it's just tough situation. Still a valuable piece of the team, as you mentioned, defensively and rebounding. He gets out in transition and he runs, but yeah, just hasn't been working offensively, really.
All right, we'll close things out by just briefly talking about the fact that this is a nice opportunity for Illinois coming up. You mentioned it towards the beginning, but at Nebraska is up next. That's a Nebraska team that did go undefeated at home in conference play last year, but has lost 2 in a row at home, 6 in a row total. Or did that reach 7 with Wisconsin? I don't know. It might have reached. Yeah, I
Six.
think it's 6 still. 6 straight losses for Nebraska, 2-7 in conference. Team that's totally reeling. Lost by 30 at Wisconsin, has gotten blown out 3 or 4 times in conference play. Yeah, it's a sneaky road game in terms of what that place has been for them here recently, but man, you have an opportunity to go get that one, which right now would still be a quad one win. Not sure if that'll last till March, but it does right now. And they don't have a big that's going to kill you with Tomislav out. That's not a front court that's going to be imposing and one that can really hurt you. So I think you can survive without him. Similarly, Ohio State comes to town a week from this past Sunday, and that would be a quad one win right now. They're 30th in the net. Again, not sure if that'll last till March, but there's their opportunities of very winnable quad one games with two teams that do not have front courts that can really hurt you without your starting center. And then you go at Rutgers and at Minnesota, a Rutgers team that, yes, they got 2 top 5 draft picks, but boy, the rest of that roster isn't very good. You should be able to win that game. The rack isn't what it used to be the past couple years. And at Minnesota, a team that's playing better, but is still the lowest rated team in the conference. So that 4-game stretch, man, like even without Tomislav in there, you got a chance to go 4-0 there, get yourself back to 10-4, get yourself back to that outside shot of the Big Ten race. But even setting that aside, just putting yourself back in firm contention for a high seed in the tournament, back in the picture in terms of the top of the Big Ten. And there's your stretch where hopefully after that you could get Tomislav back, be back at full strength, really hit your stride and be playing your best basketball heading into March. But a real opportunity for Illinois to get that record back looking like it should. And I think these matchups set up well for Illinois. I'd be pretty pleased with 3 of these 4, considering 3 of them are on the road, and Ohio State is a good team. But you got a chance to win all of them, and at the very least, just take care of business here, and I think Illinois will be in a perfectly fine spot.
Yeah, I've given up on the Big Ten title hopes personally, but these are still crucial games. If you want to be a 3, 4, 5 seed in the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament, you got to win these games. It's like these are teams in the lower half of the Big Ten, but they're still top 40, top 50 teams on Ken Pom and Bart Torvik. Like the Big Ten is so with 18 teams, it's just like the 12th best team is a top 40 team in the country still. So it's crazy. Um, I will say I don't think they go 4-0. Just it's still an inconsistent team. I don't think there's any way they have Big T for any of these games personally. I think they win 3 on the road, and I think we lose to Ohio State because Ohio State, that's a noon game on CBS on Sunday. That's Illinois is never going to win a huge game at home again, so I'm chalking that up as a loss. But yeah, Nebraska, still a decent team, just been, as you said, lost 6 in a row, been blown out a couple times. They've let teams just demolish them from the 3-point line, so that gives me some hope that maybe Illinois does turn this 3-point ship around. I'm not counting on it, but definitely potential there. And then Rutgers, I can't believe Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper wasted 1 year of college playing in Piscataway, bro. It's crazy. And then Minnesota, a couple big wins recently, but still not a team you're super scared of. Not a really tough environment at the barn. So yeah, like I think I think you want to win 3, as you said. I think 4 is definitely in the realm of possibility, just given that Illinois is better than all of these 4 teams. But I can't trust them to win 4. But I think it is going to be a pretty nice stretch for Illinois, where they gain some confidence, get some guys healthy again. Hopefully, Big T heals up a bit and starts feeling better during this stretch. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good stretch for Illinois, and I think it's a pretty good time to be missing Big T for a stretch of games.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly in that sense. It'd be nice if maybe he got it right after Maryland, but other than that, I think it's worked out well schedule wise. And I agree with you. I think the one thing this team has shown is that you can't Sharpie any game in as a win for this team and say, well, Illinois should take care of that one. We don't know. I mean, this team has proven they're volatile. I don't think there's a game on their schedule they can't lose, and that's all four of these games, especially considering the road aspect of it. But I think it's well within this team's capability to win all these games. I personally would be pleased with 3 of the 4. I think that puts you in a totally fine spot. Whatever that loss may be, I don't think it really makes a difference one way or another. You have the opportunity to really make your mark and take care of this stretch. And if you were to win all 4 of these games, you really could put yourself back in that top of the Big Ten mix potentially, depending on what some other teams do. But just take advantage of this opportunity. Don't stumble here. Should be very manageable even without Tomislav and some good opponents, good matchups to be missing him for. I think Merez should be able to hold it down. You shouldn't have to feel the loss of him as much as he did against Maryland. And I think it sets up well for Illinois to maybe build some momentum here and go on a nice little stretch. And it should be interesting to see how that happens. So we'll be back sometime, probably early next week, to talk some more after the Nebraska and Ohio State games, and we'll see if we have any updates on Tomislav Ivisic's status. Hopefully no one else gets sick or injured at that point, and Illinois can just get back whole at some point here in the next couple weeks. I do agree with you, though. If I had to make a prediction, I'd say that you probably don't get Tomislav back till about mid-February. That's just kind of my rough guess based on how mono usually goes and just the time it takes to get back. Maybe you can get him back, for a Rutgers or Minnesota game on a limited minutes capacity, and then hopefully get him back full strength in mid-February. We'll see, though. It's just kind of play it by ear, and probably won't get very many updates until he returns officially, but we'll cover that here, and we'll talk some more hoops next week. So until then, be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at Champagne on Ice. Subscribe to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel. All our episodes stream live there, and find us wherever else you get your podcasts as well. Apple, Spotify, Google. We are found everywhere. Hope everybody enjoys the week, enjoys